and welcome to this week's episode of ECCB Connects. This week we'll be looking at retirement planning, and we have with us again Mr. Analdo Bailey, Chief Executive Officer of the Eastern Caribbean Institute of Banking and Financial Services. Mr. Bailey, welcome again to ECCB Connects.
Thank you. It is good to be connecting once again.
Mr. Bailey, we tend to spend most of our years working, and then when we come to retirement, for most of us it's a shock because we're not prepared. At what point in a person's career should he or she think of retirement or planning for retirement?
I'll say now, no matter what age you are, once you're employed, you should begin to think about what quality of life you're going to live after you would have retired, because we all would retire at some point. And the sooner we start planning for retirement, the better and more secure we're going to be when that day eventually comes. And so now is the time when we should all be planning towards retirement and for retirement.
You mentioned at a session you had some time ago with a group that financial security is the result of choices we make rather than the income we earn.
True.
Okay, how is that related to retirement and preparing for retirement?
It's very important because for many of us, we think that retirement means that we'll have so much leisure time that we'll be just having fun. But fun also requires money. And so you must have prepared. In fact, what has been stated over and over by surveys, one requires at least 70% of your current income to maintain the lifestyle throughout retirement. And so if at the age of retirement you have not secured, as it were, some resource on which you can draw, and the resource must not be just a pool, the resource must also be, there's a stream that is flowing in. And so certainly you must now plan to ensure that you have at least 70% of your income, current income, to ensure that you maintain the standard of living and lifestyle that is required during retirement.
So retirement here sounds to me not so much about age, but more about the income level at which you will retire.
You've been quite perceptive. Many of us would think in terms of retirement as, okay, at what age should I retire? I recommend that we think at what level of income should you retire, not at what age. And so income, that is what takes us forward, accomplishing the task one, and also the objectives that we want to achieve. And I can assure you, during retirement, you're still going to be having objectives that you wish to achieve, and there's some additional considerations, because one retires generally, and you do have more discretionary time, but at the same time, health and insurance and all of those things that generally might have been taken care of when you're younger, all of those now require more outlay. And so it's very, very important that we begin now to have an appreciation that it is not at retirement when all these things fall away. That's not the truth.
Okay. How does an individual then prepare for this transition from active full-time job to retirement?
Knowing that your source of income that you're accustomed to, that is no longer there, you must now plan as to where are you going to be deriving income going forward. Of course, one would determine, I do have a pool, a nest egg, and therefore I can begin to take some of that. But like anything else, if there's no water going into the reservoir, if you're not careful, the reservoir will certainly run dry. And so we have this issue. How are we going to generate income during our retirement age? And one, you would have interest or dividends that might be coming in, and you do not wait until you're retired to then begin to determine that level. That must have been determined prior. You might also have income that is generated from rental of some apartment, some house, something of that nature. There's also the question of gratuity, which is a pool, and how are you going to treat with that? Are you going to continue to use your gratuity towards paying whatever expenses that you might have, even mortgages. And so one critical element, the more that you can reduce your outlay in relation to utilities, you also have the question not just of utilities, but you might have expenses to do with bank loans. Those should be cleared prior to retirement. Additionally, one would want to, very, very often, what I've discovered, that persons will wait until it is so late to begin to try and put some investment in place. Now, the younger you are, the more risk tolerant you are, meaning that I can take more risk because if something goes wrong, if my investment falls through, then I have more time to make up. But the older you are, the less risk tolerant you're likely to be. So you're planning to then do something that is more safe and secure. And we all know risk and return goes together. And so if you wish for a large return, then the risk certainly is greater. And so the risk is something you must appreciate. As an older person, your risk tolerance is much lower. Therefore, now is the time when you should begin to plan and take that level of risk. That would assure you of the returns going forward.
Mr. Bailey, you've touched on some of the key elements that an individual needs to consider when planning for retirement or preparing for retirement. You spoke about the financial considerations, but there's some other aspects an individual needs to think of and needs to consider as they plan for retirement.
It's important that we have an appreciation for these elements. One, insurance. Are you currently insured? Do you have not just endowment, but do you have life insurance and do you have medical insurance? Knowing fully well that the costs associated with health tend to escalate the older you become. Then, of course, what about your pension? Do you know the level of pension that you are going to be receiving once you retire? What about gratuity? Do you know how much? What is the quantum? In addition, at a certain age, there are many institutions will allow you to have what is called retirement accounts. That is, you can have increased interest on the basis of establishing a retirement account prior to retiring. And of course, you have senior citizens account where you get special again dispensation because you're a senior citizen. And then, if you are currently paying a mortgage, at what time, what age would you want to complete paying a mortgage? Do you want to be continuing to pay a mortgage after you would have retired? Why? Then, of course, senior citizen discounts. Those are elements that one should be taking on board now, not at the point of retirement. What is important for us to have this appreciation? The quality of life that you desire to have during retirement is going to depend upon the plans and programs that you would have instituted prior to retiring. One has to appreciate, what do you truly want to do when you would have retired? For example, where do you want to live? Would you be staying in your existing home or you're going to have a smaller home? Are you going to be at what is considered as a home for the retirees? Do you want to be part of a community? Do you want to be by yourself? Are you going to have some domestic help, some cleaner coming in? Those are things that one has to consider prior to reaching retirement. Are you going to be living with a family member, or is a family member coming to live with you? Those are important things to take on board. Because once you would have retired and then begin to try and put those in place, then it becomes so aggravating sometimes and difficult. And so those are some of the things in addition to the financial consideration.
Yeah, and health is another very important issue because, you know, as you get older, your health starts to deteriorate.
So true. And we know that that's a source of great outlay. Mm-hmm. To maintain your health is important, but to restore health is even much more expensive. Mm-hmm. And there are persons who, because of lack of insurance and proper insurance, they end up having to sell their property just to seek to secure health.
Another important factor is persons who are planning for retirement or getting to that stage have to be very aware of the current scams, because I've read of several instances where elderly persons have been scammed out of their savings, scammed out of their pension, getting involved in these Ponzi schemes, and even sometimes relatives come in and try to you know, run a fast one on them.
I wish there was a way to have this, like a beep Beep, 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 alert, pay attention, because here in St. Kitts, like many other parts of the world, it is certainly becoming more and more a problem. Where persons, because of their failure to plan properly towards retirement, once they've reached the age of retirement, they're seeking somehow at that point to look some scheme that is able to generate income. And very often, if it is too good to be true, perhaps it is. And the various means and schemes that has been engineered, organized, directed at retirees, because they now belatedly have become aware that they need to increase their level of income, and they become prey for fraudsters.
You mentioned earlier that the time to start planning for retirement is now. However, younger individuals at the start of their career in their 20s, 30s may say, no, retirement is way, way down the road. I have, greater things to do right now. What would you say to the younger workers?
No, what I'll say to them is that they must have an appreciation for the fact of what we call it is like borrowing money from a bank. And you borrow a certain sum, and you pay back in installments. And at the end of the period, especially a mortgage loan, you'll be surprised to know how much you would end up paying, because you can end up paying 3 times as much as you borrowed. Savings operate in the same principle. If you were to start saving a small amount regularly, it means that at a point in time, 20 years from now, you'll be amazed at how much would have been accumulated, because you have what is called compounding of interest. And so once you've set aside a retirement account, and that is for retirement, it is not an account to which you go and withdraw and take and put on. It is constantly, I'm going to save a specific sum towards my retirement. You'll be amazed at what compound interest can do. And that is why we must start now, because then it not only the discipline, but it also shows you that what the pool that will be at the end, it would surpass your wildest expectation, just because of what we call compounding of interest. Once it is there and compounded interest and interest, interest and interest, you'll be amazed at what it would mean by the time you would have retired.
Let's say there's an individual who did not start to plan for retirement early. They're now close to retirement. Is there any hope for such a person?
There's always hope. There's always hope. And so what one has to do is to seek advice. Do not just go on emotions, because this might occur. Now that you're hearing and you're listening, your listeners are hearing what is happening, they might be tempted, wow, I better do something now. And so they might be taking chances, and the risk as such would become even magnified. And that is why you need someone who is not as involved emotionally to advise you and analyze and direct you in terms of where you should place your investment to ensure maximum return at the level of risk that you are prepared to bear. And so I would advise that we go and seek advice from professionals.
So planning, critical, and planning now. Don't wait until you're close to retirement.
Indeed. And what I'll say, for me, a mantra of mine is, many of us do think, but thinking is not planning. You can think in the various options. Planning means that you would have chosen. So first we think, then we plan, and a plan is not important unless you take some action. So all that we're saying through these programs requires us to think deeply about what they have heard and begin to plan. How are you going to act on the basis of what you now would have heard? And of course, take action. Outside of this, all you would have done is to just have some entertainment.
Planning, early planning, taking action.
Indeed. And with what the saying goes, what? Prior planning prevents poor performance. So if you do not wish to perform poorly at the end, plan now.
Now. Mr. Bailey, thank you again for speaking
Thank you.
with us
My
on
privilege.
ECCB
My
Connect.
privilege and pleasure always. Thank you kindly.
You're watching ECCB Connects, protecting our currency, developing our region. To view any episode of ECCB Connects, anytime, any place, at your convenience, check out our YouTube channel, ECCB Connects.
We've come to the end of this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Thank you very much for watching, and do join us again next week when we'll be back with another program. Remember, if you have a topic you'd like us to cover, message us on Facebook.